Today I'm joined by Stuart Wilson. Stuart's the founder and owner of Lost Sheep Coffee, and they make specialty coffee fun, accessible, and totally unpretentious. So, welcome, Stuart.
Thanks for having me, son. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. So, Stuart, tell us a little bit more about Lost Sheep Coffee.
Yeah, I mean, look, as you just said there, we're a speciality coffee roastery. We look at ourselves as a specialty coffee brand really these days, but we started out back in 2012 with a three-wheeled coffee van that I used to drive into Canterbury High Street and used to pitch up outside Starbucks, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but it was terrible actually. But exactly what that you just said there, we aim to make specialty coffee accessible. And what we mean by that is specialty coffee is roughly the top 5% in the world for quality of coffee. And normally it's reserved for like the people who are, sort of elite coffee drinkers and stuff like that. But what we want to do is put that into the everyday coffee drinker. So we make it accessible by taking that coffee and putting it into products that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see it, or into situations you wouldn't necessarily expect to see that level of quality coffee. And that's the fun part of what we do.
Give us an example, Stuart. What would be a environment or a product that you've
Yeah.
sort of put it into that's
So look, the most recent one is we now have just launched the RTD, so ready to drink iced coffee cans.
nice?
We are the first people in the UK who have got farm to can traceability on our coffee in every single can. So, like, literally, we do a iced latte, we do an iced caramel latte, and we do a iced mocha. So they're all dairy based.
Yeah,
That brings difficulties on its own side of things.
sure.
But no one else can do what we do. Where we are the people roasting that coffee that is in every single can. So you've got this whole traceability aspect all the way from the farm through to the can you'll be drinking. So normally that's reserved for other big brands that we shan't name, who make their coffee with instant coffee, commercial grade coffee. So that's not what we're about. We want that quality to come through. And the most recent innovation, obviously, is that for us. We just won November last year, the World Coffee Innovation Awards on the iced coffee cans, which we we're really pleased about. No one's ever heard of the award, but it's really good. It's an industry award. It's an industry award, but it's great for us. So that's the most recent innovation that we've done, because for us, it's not just about putting beans in a bag and selling it, because that's not making it accessible. It is all about taking it and putting it into that. But that's the most recent one we've done.
Brilliant stuff. Look, okay, look, thanks for that example. So, look, Stuart, tell us a little bit about. Let's go right back to the beginning, because I think you sort of set the business up in 2011, 2012. So, tell us a little bit more about why you set the business up. For instance, had you always wanted to be a business owner, and how you got into setting up your own business?
Yeah, I mean, look, if we probably go back to maybe, yeah, the beginning kind of thing, how that kind of journey started. Um, and then it kind of was a bit of an accident to a certain degree. I've always loved coffee. I've always been a bit of a what I call a coffee drinker, if you know what I mean. But I think a lot of people identify as that anyway. And for us, it just kind of grew into a business. But basically, I had the 9 till 5. I had the career job. And I say 9 till 5, it's more like an 8 till 8, but you know what it's like. It's basically you paid 9 till 5. And I had that, and I used to commute to and from work, and I basically felt like a sheep, keep going to the office and everything. And I said to my wife one day, and I was like, look, I've had enough of this. I want to go and get lost and go backpacking the world.
Yeah.
So at that point, I didn't know what we was going to do, to be honest with you. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then we were backpacking around the world, went all around Asia. I was, got to Melbourne, Australia. And this was, as you just said, 2011. And it's right at the beginning of like the coffee scene, kind of. And I just fell in love with the Aussie style coffee. It's just like something I'd never tasted before. It was relaxed, it was smooth, it was chocolate. It's everything you want from a coffee, but without that like nasty bitterness or teacher breath afterwards. You know what I mean? And essentially, I remember I learned my friend, still to this day, actually, he's flying over from Australia in a couple of weeks, actually. Sergio, he taught me all about Italian coffee because he's Italian, but he also taught me all about Aussie coffee. So he taught me the fundamentals. And I got back to the UK, and even in London, back in 2012, when we started the business, even in London, it was still very much an emerging coffee scene, maybe two or three places to buy, specialty coffee in London,
Yeah.
let alone Kent. And so Lost Sheep Coffee was born in 2012 from the back of a three-wheel coffee van that I used to drive into Canterbury High Street. I mean, that's a real quick snippet, obviously,
No,
but
no, thank you for that overview, and it's great. I always love to hear about how businesses were started up, and yeah, that you've, from that journey, you've moved to and created what you are now, winning the awards, as you've said. So, look, I'm sure along that journey and over those years, there were some challenges along the way. What was the biggest challenge that you've faced being a business owner?
I mean, look, great question. Like, genuinely great question. I mean, look, it's one that gets asked to me in private conversation quite a lot anyway. And look, I could default to COVID, and but everyone's going to say COVID because we know what it did to everyone. And that was our biggest. It probably was our biggest challenge. We unfortunately lost one of our shops during it and stuff like that. But if I was to take that out of the equation, for me, really, in the sort of 13, 14 years I've been doing coffee, the biggest challenges have been for me just trusting in my instincts, if I'm being honest with you, because it's very easy sometimes to get the masses to talk you out of an idea. And the biggest challenge for me is actually believing in myself, and actually committing to them sometimes very crazy ideas I have. And yeah, I think for me, that's the biggest thing because as a business person, a founder, or whatever you want to refer to yourself, it can be quite bloody lonely because you might have these ideas, and yes, you can back them off with friends and family, but sometimes you need, I don't want to say mentor, but just a sounding board person that you can chat to. And I didn't have that. And that kind of brings it back into why that became a challenge for me, is because I had to believe in my own, ideas, the commitment to those ideas, without having the ability being able to afford a business coach or have access to a mentor and stuff like that. Although I think if I probably had, they would have thought I was crazy anyway. So.
So I think, and it's interesting you should say that, because actually that's one of the reasons that we do these sort of podcasts and interviews. For that exact reason is that we often, being a business owner can be a lonely place, and actually,
Yeah.
other people can watch this and resonate with you saying that and go, oh, it's not just me. Then actually, other business owners feel like that as well because they do. So yeah, no, look, that's really open and honest with you. And so, how have you overcome some of those challenges, in trusting in your instincts and believing in yourself and feeling, in that lonely place?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for me personally, some of the the biggest challenges of like overcoming that whole, not having the sounding board and stuff is just, when you do have a failure, and this is not a bad word, is don't take it personally, learn from it. And I think what happens is, for me personally anyway, and the best advice I can give other people, I guess, is be really hyper analytical. Don't don't put the don't make the decisions always with the heart, if you know what I mean. If something's gone wrong, get the analytical brain out and say, do you know what? I'm going to dissect this and actually say, look, what actually did I muck up? Don't blame other people. But at the end of the day, the buck stops at me. So if something's gone wrong, it's normally because I've either let it go wrong by not managing it, or equally, I'm the one who made the direct decision, basically. So I think for me personally, that's one of the biggest things, is actually essentially taking ownership, if you will, and then dissecting an error. But equally doing that when something's gone well. Why did that go well? What did we do right? How did that go right? Did we fluke it? Did we plan it? So
I think there's some real good things there that I'd like to highlight from what you said. Learn from failure, which is and you said there it's not a bad word. Absolutely right. That actually, as long as we learn from them and move on, I thought that was a great thing. And be analytical. I always say to my clients, look, if we base our decisions on analytical things, numbers and things that have happened, we can make an informed decision. If we don't do that, we're effectively just gambling. And by the way, even if we do go with our what we believe is our heart, actually our heart is guided by our mind and what we know and what we've learned anyway. So there is an element of analytical in there, even if we do go with our heart. So I thought that was a good thing. Be analytical, know the data, know the numbers, base decisions and things on that as well. And actually it also links in, Stuart, to something else you said, which, during COVID, I found, there was two, if I was to be sort of look at two extremes, there was two types of business owners. One that took ownership, accountability and responsibility. The ones like you said there, okay? The ones that sort of said, right, look, we are in this situation. We can't do anything about it. We are where we are, but we can't do anything about the situation, but what can we do with our business? Actions can we actually take? And as you say, that's about taking that ownership. The buck stops with you, okay? Yeah. Ownership, accountability and responsibility. And then at the other end of the spectrum were those people that use blame, excuses and denial. Okay, it's not my fault. It's the government. They're all making the wrong decisions. Boris Johnson is making the wrong decisions. He's done that. He's done that. And that's blame, excuses and denial. So I like those things that you've really highlighted there. I call it being above the point of power, ownership, accountability and responsibility, being analytical and learn from your failures. Great advice there. Love that. So Stuart, like if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge right now, what would it be?
Cash flow. Doesn't matter how big you get. The bigger you get, the more of a pain in the backside it is. But yeah, I mean, jokes aside, yeah, what would I change? I think, yeah. I don't know, if I'm being brutally honest with you. I don't know, which is not a great answer for a podcast, I know. But I mean, jokes aside though, cash flow, if I'm being honest with you, it was quite nice. I did a little program recently run by KCC, great group that I was part of. And it's almost a dirty word, if you know what I mean. You know, because everyone's like, well, you must, if you're doing next revenue, you must be, raking it in, and yeah, you can be, but if you've got like 90-day terms or something, means you've got to then bloody do 90-day terms with your stuff. So I actually think genuinely, it's if there was a magic wand for that sort of thing, I think it would be great. And I think a lot of business owners don't talk about it because they kind of feel almost like it's admitting that there's a problem when there's not. I think like I think 90% of business owners I spoke to, cash flow is always a problem. And it was for us when we was doing an £80,000 a year business, and now obviously it's over £1 million a year. The problem still persists no matter what, because the more ideas you get, the more you want to spend on things,
And it's actually what I like about what you've highlighted there is actually as your business gets bigger, the cash flow problem can get bigger. Part of this, and you're probably familiar with it, is there's something called the cash gap. The cash gap is from, when you have to pay for your, your materials, and then the gap between when you get paid for your end product. And if your business gets bigger, that gap, it might stay the same size, but it just gets deeper because the numbers are bigger.
You're absolutely right. I mean, look, a percentage, or whether it's 5 or 10 or 15%, a percentage is a percentage, and it just means the physical number gets bigger as you get bigger yourself, basically. But
And what I like that you've highlighted there, Stuart, again, to emphasize one of the other points that I thought was great is the difference between cash flow and profitability.
Oh,
Because
too good. I mean,
yeah, you can have great profitability, but managing cash flow is something your profitability can be tied up in stock and material and assets and people that owe you money and those sort of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got great cash flow. So great point that you highlighted there.
yeah, I think look, it's definitely something that's always any when you're in a supplying a product that costs you money to produce or store, like going back to those ready to drink cans, I have to be ordering 60,000 cans per SKU per time. That's a lot of stock, if you know what I mean. So it's definitely something we always consider and think about. But again, part of that course, that KCC run was great. It was really good. It was, I think they're doing it again actually. But anyway, you can talk about different, levers you can pull and stuff like that to change things around and stuff. It's good information, but yeah, it's definitely I think something that can even healthy businesses can have problems with, if you know what I mean.
I've definitely sort of seen that myself. Yeah, really profitable businesses struggling with cash flow and even failing because of cash flow as well. So yeah, as you're absolutely right. It's not just small businesses, but again, what I like there is you've identified a challenge in your business, and then you've gone, okay, well, look, let's go out and learn about cash flow. You found, a course with KCC that, will help you to understand it and manage it and learn things. So brilliant again. And I think that's what we need to do as business owners is actually understand the things that we need to know and then go for look for ways that we can develop those skills and understand it. So great stuff. Okay. So what would you say the biggest learning that you've had since you've been in business is, Stuart?
Biggest learning?
Yeah.
I mean, again, good question again, really. I think biggest learning for me is kind of just going back to what I said a little bit earlier on about that whole accountability piece for me is then learning not to take that personally, if that makes sense. Leave work at the door. So I'm very hot on, work's work, family's family. And I'm pretty tight on that, to be honest with you.
Good.
And the biggest learning curve for me is when things don't go well, just that's as long as you've done everything you can. But the biggest learn for me is to separate family and work. If you know, so it's a bit of a twofold answer there, to be honest with you. But essentially, the bigger of the two really is separating family and work. Essentially, that's quite important to me.
And again, I agree with you because they can start to encroach if you sort of start to take work and not necessarily physical work, but just mentally. You're going home to your family, but actually you're there in person, but your mind's somewhere else because it's thinking about work or cash flow or whatever it may be. But yeah, so that's a great thing to share, to sort of say, right, okay, yeah, learn how to keep the two separate. When you're at work, you're at work. You're focused on work. When you're with your family, you're focused on your family.
Absolutely. And look, for me, that's critical for my sanity. Because for your own mental health, if you're just constantly on that bicycle or being self-employed or running a business, whatever you want to call it, if you're never switching off, then when's your downtime? When's your relaxing time? Basically, and I appreciate not everyone can do that. I do appreciate that, and there is times maybe once every few months where I do have to do something or take a call at night because we're talking to another country or something like that. That happens on occasions, but I definitely think one of my biggest personal successes is separating my family life and my work life, and it's something that I'm really happy that we do, to be honest.
And I think, and as you say, it's not an easy thing to do because particularly when you're starting out with business, it can become all-encompassing. But I think one of the important things to do there is to specifically allocate time to family time. To say, right, okay, on at this time of day or in the evening or at weekends,
Yeah.
Right, specifically allocate that as family time. And it may not be achievable all of the time straight away,
Yeah.
but it's more likely to happen if if that time's been allocated. It's more likely to happen than if it's not. So yeah, so hopefully a bit of a tip for people listening to this as well to think about that. And look, there's a question I always like to ask everybody that's kind enough to join me on this discussion, Stuart, and that's this: what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you?
Go for it.
Yeah,
The best time in your life is to, in my personal opinion, is the best time in your life is to try sort of something, is when you are in your late teens, early 20s, and if you're fortunate enough to still live with a parent or guardian, whoever, but let's say you're in a home where you don't have to maybe pay rent, or something like that, or your outgoings are as low as possible. That's the time to go and try and launch something. That's the time to go and do something, because you know what? You've got less to lose. And the more, the smaller what you've got to lose is, maybe the more risk you might take. Be sensible, obviously. But in my opinion, I think being 18, 19, 20, up to the age of 25 even, I'd love to be able to rewrite those years in a business format. Don't get me wrong, I loved my life when I was that age. But if you're looking to create something and you're in your 18 sort of year old age or something, go for it. Because do you know what? The flexibility and the freedom you have as a 18 to 25-year-old will never be repeated in the rest of your life, in my personal experience. And do you know what? It's so easy to go online and start something. If you're in that age bracket, you've got so much more knowledge than I have on how to start up an online business or something. You've been brought up, you've lived in that world all your life. And so yeah, I'd say absolutely go for it. Personally, absolutely go for it.
Great advice, and completely agree with you. I think that's a great time in life to experiment, to try different things. And yeah, so yeah, great advice. Thank you very much, Stuart. So Stuart, I'd really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me on.